Welcome to it, everybody. The Chris Salcedo Show, and a rather somber day, the remembrance of the September 11th attacks, and we are joined now by one of our senators here in the great state of Texas, Senator Ted Cruz. This is TED Talk 2, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk with him briefly, a question from your humble host here, and then open up the phone lines to you. Senator Cruz, welcome back to the Salcedo Show.
Good morning, Chris. It's good to be with you.
Sir, it's always a pleasure having you as well. The first question is going to be an easy one. 17 years since this awful day in 2001. Your remembrances, sir, where we were, where we've been, and where we're going.
Well, sure. I think every one of us remembers where we were on September 11th. Heidi and I were living in D.C. We were newlyweds, had just been married in May of 2001. And Heidi was actually working at the White House that day, in the George W. Bush White House. I was at our apartment getting ready to walk out the front door and head to work, and Heidi called me and said, "Stop, turn on the television." And so I turned around and turned on the TV, and the first plane had just hit the first tower in New York. And we watched in horror. All of us watched in horror. Of course, everyone thought initially, when the first plane had hit, that this might have been some tragic accident. It might have been something that a plane gone awry, a pilot had a heart attack. We didn't know what had happened. But then when the second plane flew into the second tower, everyone realized in an instant this was something qualitatively different. Heidi at the White House, initially, they told everyone, stay where you are. Just stay where you are, stay at your desk. When the second plane hit, when they realized that it was terrorism, that we were under attack, the Secret Service ran through the hallways and told everyone, get out now, run, do not walk, run. Wow. Heidi took off her high heels and she ran barefoot out of the White House. She wasn't able to get to her car. Her car was parked in an underground garage that they wouldn't let her access. So she ended up walking home. We lived in Northern Virginia at the time, so she walked across Memorial Bridge in her bare feet. Our apartment was just south of the Pentagon, less than a mile away from the Pentagon. And when the plane hit the Pentagon, the smoke, you could smell the smoke from our apartment. Out the window, you could just smell the soot in the air. And it was a day... Today, none of us knew exactly what was happening. There were reports when the plane that hit the Pentagon initially hit. We had the TV on watching. Early reports suggested that instead of the Pentagon, that it had hit the White House, and from some angles, it looked like that's where the smoke was coming from. That obviously was very dismaying when Heidi was there.
Right.
We discovered subsequently that it didn't hit the White House, and I think the best estimates are the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, because of the heroism of the passengers there, that plane was likely headed for the White House, either the White House or the Capitol. But that was a day for all of us that over 3,000 lives were snuffed out in an instant. And America was suddenly at war. We were at war with a grotesque evil, with radical Islamic terrorism, with a jihadist philosophy, a jihadist, faith-driven zealotry and murder that changed the world. Now, I will say we have traveled an amazing journey in the 17 years since then. We have defeated the Taliban in Afghanistan. We have toppled Saddam Hussein. And in the last 2 years, we have utterly routed ISIS, taking virtually every square inch of the territory they have seized. And so radical Islamic terrorism has been on the run, but it remains real. It remains a threat, and every one of us must remain vigilant.
You have been one of the warriors on the forefront of all of this, and I'm going to go to break a little bit early, Senator Cruz, because I want to give you as much time as you possibly can. Your schedule only permitted you to be with us for a half an hour today. I say only, but you've been giving us an unprecedented level of access to you, thus giving our listeners access to you, and I want them to have plenty of time to talk with you. Senator Ted Cruz, our guest right now, folks. It's the Chris Salcedo Show. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. That is the telephone number. We do not script your questions. This is TED Talk, ladies and gentlemen. Our Senator Ted Cruz setting aside some time to connect with you directly, ladies and gentlemen. We don't edit the questions. You ask them whatever's on your mind to the senator as he's busy trying to run for re-election and also do the people's work in Washington, D.C. Senator, we go to Watauga first. Matthew was in the line. Matthew, go ahead.
Sir, I was watching the Kavanaugh things, and one of the things they were scared of is that he supports school vouchers. I do too, and that's one thing I'd like to see get done, because you would make the education system 10 times better if you can take your kid essentially away from a failing school and say, hey, you don't get my money. What do you think,
Matthew? Thank you for that question. I very much agree with you. I think school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I think every child in Texas should have the right to have access to a quality education, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their wealth, regardless of their zip code. I think school choice is all about the rich and middle class have always had school choice, have always had the ability that if the local school they have is not doing the job it needs, they can take their kids out and move them. School choice is about giving every parent that right and that ability. I'll note what Brett Kavanaugh said, and this is important, and all of our listeners know this. Brett Kavanaugh said as a judge, not that he supports school choice, because it's not a judge's job to support or oppose a policy, but rather that his job will be to follow the Constitution. And under the Constitution, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision called the Zellman decision, rightly upheld school choice programs as consistent with the Constitution. It should have been 9-0 and not 5-4, but I think Judge Kavanaugh is exactly right that there's no constitutional bar to allowing you to send your kid to the schools you want, whether if you want a public school, fantastic. If you want private school, a parochial school, a religious school, you, the parent, should have that right, that choice. And I want to mention, Matthew, actually the legislative accomplishment I'm most proud of for the last 6 years. In the last 6 years, I've passed 32 pieces of legislation, but the one I'm most proud of concerns exactly the topic you asked about, school choice, which is last December, as part of the tax bill, when we were passing the tax bill, I introduced an amendment to expand college 529 savings plans. Now, 529 savings plans are immensely popular. About 18 million Americans use them. They allow parents and grandparents to save in a tax-advantaged way for college education. My amendment expanded 529 savings plans, so now you can still use them for college, but you can also use them for K through 12 education. You can use them for public school, for private school, parochial school, religious school, your choice. You can save and spend up to $10,000 per year per child. That amendment ended up being the only amendment that was adopted on the Senate floor that added any bill. It passed 50-50 with the Vice President of the United States breaking the tie. He had to come down to the Capitol floor at about 1 a.m. to break the tie. And it is the most significant and far-reaching federal school choice legislation that has ever passed, potentially impacting and benefiting up to 50 million school kids across the country. So, Matthew, I agree with you, and I'm going to continue fighting to expand school choice and to continue empowering parents to choose the very best education for your kids.
Senator, Matthew, by the way, thank you very much for the call. Senator, I'll introduce a tangential topic to education here, an advisory panel to the Texas Education Agency and the school districts in the state of Texas. An advisory panel advised removing the word heroic to describe the Alamo defenders. This is exactly what parents who want school choice are worried about, that they want to be able to hold these districts accountable to the parents, to the people who are actually using the product. And these school boards seem to be running amok and not really interested in teaching what the parents want taught. Doesn't school choice remedy that?
It certainly could. Look, I have to say the discussion about removing the word heroic from defining that and describing the defenders at the Alamo, I think is the height of lunacy. To have an advisory group make that recommendation, it's part of this political correctness that we have seeping in to every aspect of our lives. It's part of the effort that seeks to tear down monuments to folks from the Civil War, and that next will be tearing down the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. And by the way, it's part of the same lunacy that is talking about renaming the city of Austin because apparently now we can't acknowledge Stephen F. Austin. This is all driven by a radical leftist ideology that is embarrassed about America, that is embarrassed about Texas. The defenders at the Alamo were heroes. I've had for 20 years in my office Travis's letter from the Alamo hanging on the wall as some of the most inspiring and powerful words of courage. As those brave men gave their lives and sacrificed, that's what led ultimately to the freedom and the independence of the Republic of Mexico, where for 9 years we were our own nation, and then we became a state in the greatest state in the history of the greatest nation in the history of the world. And no, we should not be purging our history or whitewashing it or pretending somehow that it satisfies some cultural studies leftist organization at some university. We need to remember history and remember it and speak the truth.
We go to Jacksonville next. Don is waiting. Don, appreciate you making the Chris Salcedo Show. You're on with Senator Ted Cruz.
Hello, Mr. Cruz. I just wanted to make a point that I live in South Central Texas, and my 30-something kids live in the Dallas-Plano area, and they've never heard of Mr. Cruz. All they've heard of is the man with the black and white signs, and I think you need some more recognition with a younger crowd in person versus radio and TV.
Thank you, Don.
Well, Don, thank you for that comment. I'll tell you, I agree with you. The last 2 weeks, we have done 19 town halls all over the state of Texas. We have been in East Texas. We've been in North Texas. We've been up in the Panhandle. We've been in West Texas. We've been in the Hill Country. We've been on the Gulf Coast. So we're doing events all across the state in person. Don, I would encourage you to come out and join one of our events. Encourage your kids to come out and join one of our events. You're right that there are a lot of signs. There are a lot of Beto O'Rourke signs. I'll tell you there's a reason for that, which is what we're seeing in this race nationally. The extreme left is ticked off. They're angry. They're enraged. And as a result, they are flooding the state of Texas with tens of millions of dollars from liberals in Hollywood and all over the country. Now, that kind of money, and they're out raising us 2 to 1, nearly 3 to 1. That kind of money has consequences. One of the things they've been able to do with those tens of millions of dollars, they've invested $4 million in signs. Now, let me tell you, $4 million buys a lot of signs. So if you go out and see a lot of yard signs, you'll know why. If you spend $4 million, you get a ton of signs. Why don't we have $4 million of signs? It's a very simple answer. We don't have the $4 million. We're raising money, and we're going to have the resources to compete and compete effectively, but we are being outspent dramatically. What that means is that we're relying on you, Don. We're relying on your friends, your neighbors. We're relying on your kids. I would say one of the most direct things I would ask you to do is for you to talk to your kids, you to talk to your friends, you to talk to your neighbors, and say why this election matters. This election is a fundamental choice. It is a choice between dramatically different paths we're on. If you or your kids or anyone else wants a yard sign, we have tens of thousands of yard signs being distributed right now throughout the state. But the easiest way to get a yard sign is go to our website. It's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. You can order the yard sign right on the website. It'll be shipped straight to your house. You can order one, or you can order in bulk. You can order 50 or 100 or more, but it'll be shipped directly to your house. That's the easiest way to get it. But, Don, I would really underscore, your question shows why the grassroots matter. We know that the mainstream media is going to do what it's been doing nonstop, which is every 2 to 3 days doing these glowing profiles of Beto O'Rourke, mentioning nothing about his extreme policy positions, not mentioning that he wants to raise taxes and raise regulation and impose socialized medicine, not mentioning that he has said he is open to abolishing ICE, abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, not mentioning that he has promised to vote to impeach Donald Trump. None of those get mentioned in the mainstream media. Instead, they just talk about his hair and how they just are enamored with him. And my point is, the media will not do their job, which means we have to do the job for them. We have to inform the voters. And so I need your help to reach your kids, to reach their friends, to reach their neighbors, and I need the help of everyone listening to spread the truth that freedom works, freedom matters. If Texas is going to stay free, we've got to defend the values that made Texas who we are. Senator
Ted Cruz, sir, we always appreciate your carving out time for the Salcedo Show audience. I suspect all of the stuff that you had mentioned about Beto O'Rourke, that the reason why he's not debating you is because he wants to keep that under wraps here in the state of Texas. The more people find out about him, the more I believe he'll be rejected. I made a promise to your campaign to make sure that you were out on time. So, Ted Cruz, you are welcome back anytime. What was the name of that website one more time, sir?
It is tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. And let me point out again, we are seeing tens of millions of dollars flood into Texas from Hollywood liberals and from liberals all over the country. And so we need your help. Let me encourage every one of your listeners, please come to the website, make a contribution, get a yard sign, speak out, speak to your neighbors, engage, come out and vote in November, and make sure everyone you know does as well. This is, we were talking about the Alamo. This Texas is under assault, just like we were in the Alamo, and just as in the battle for our freedom, then Texas will prevail, but we will prevail because of the heroes that are Texans.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you, sir. We'll get you on sometime real soon here on the Chris Salcedo Show.